Before we begin, if you're drawn to the hidden lives inside old photographs, their chemistry, their secrets, the quiet grip they keep on the living, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what I'm about to show you. I work late because time is kinder to silver when the building empties. The lab breathes differently after hours. The HVAC hum flattens, the fluorescents settle into a faint insect buzz, the cool of the fume hood coils through the room like fog over a river. Paper exhales a mineral warmth that only the patient notice. When I lift the archival lid and take a sheet between nitrile and light, I hear the soft rasp of a century trying to make itself understood. Tonight the box is smaller than the others. A cabinet card, 1896, catalogued during intake as infant portrait, unidentified studio, mild silver mirroring, foxed mount. A note in pencil, someone's earlier eye, says albumin? Verify. I tilt it before I even sit. Light is the first reagent. The child is arranged in a chair too elaborate for a nursery. The upholstery is plush with a nap that runs like an animal pelt when I adjust the angle. The baby's hair is combed flat, the cheeks rounded and marbled with that peculiar brightness some lenses love, as if they can't decide whether flesh should be record or light. It's a three-quarter view, slight downward tilt, the vignette pressing in at the corners in that oval that studios favored when they wanted to soften edges and sell innocence. But the first thing that catches is not the face. It's the background and the density that ignores it. We're taught to read photographs the way meteorologists read air, not for what they say but for where they are silent. I bring the card to the light table. I like the temperature there, hand-cool, precise. Under raking light the semi-gloss surface flares and then sinks, revealing microtypography across the binder. Albumin I think first, the characteristic glassy sheen, the slight yellow in the highlights, the hairline craquelure that crosshatches like dry riverbeds. I run a gentle dry brush across the surface to whisper the dust away, always the softest filaments, sable, never pressing. The brush makes no sound, the card does. Its size, a minute relaxation of fibers. Then I see the first clue, the way restorers learn to see it in babies too still, too obedient to physics. Hidden mother. You learn the silhouette the way you learn your own shadow, the irregular mound behind the torso, a shape that pretends to be chairback but does not resolve into upholstery. In the upper left quadrant, there's a density that spreads like spilled ink beneath the light table glare, but the support differs just there. The tonality in the sepia is too even, as if printed through a mask. I shift to the stereo microscope, dial the magnification up. Emulsion cruises past like landscape from a train window, gloss islands, matte rivulets, until I stop at a seam. Around the infant's left shoulder, there's an arc of retouch that reduces the contrast between figure and what's behind it. Not the gentle pencil spotting we use to heal a scratch in a build of dots. This is painterly, a admirably restrained hand, smoothing that would have read as a human form into textile. The mother pattern differs. There's no fabric weave in it when I go oblique. The studio's backdrop shows a coarse cotton grid under magnification. This shrouding does not. The baby is not seated alone. Someone is beneath that blanket, a supporting presence moth-soft and erased. In the lab's quiet, such realizations are just work. You make a note, you note the technique. Hidden mother technique, likely shrouded support holding infant upright. Dodging or painted in matting around left shoulder. But the black in the image, the drape, does not behave. In the corner of my eye, a ripple. A breath. It's a trick of track lighting. I know this, and yet every restorer's seen the way old black cloth eats illumination, lets it crawl inside and return with a different shape. As I lean closer, the drape's edge near the infant's right ear bulges, barely, the way fabric will when hitched over a knuckle. I tell myself it's a retouching swell. Gelatin swells with humidity, albumin cups. I've seen men see faces in flame-retardant carpeting. The microscope's ring light licks the black and highlights a grain. Under the arch of the drape, a void with structure. Not a crease, not a chair finial. A void that remembers lungs. I pull away. My lab stool whispers across the linoleum. The lab glass beside me, sheets of UV acrylic leaning, carry a tiny echo of that breath. It's a habit to fight for nomenclature when nerves vault. The technique has a name. Mothers hid themselves under shawls. Third arms were common in the infancy of exposure. A baby will not hold still. A person will. Later, the studio would scumble in a darker field to confuse the outline. That's all. I let the card rest and log the condition. If I name it, the edges grow duller. When I return, I position the card under a different arm of light. Now I look at the eyes. Babies in 1896 are not like our babies. Their eyes falter, understand time. Time was a thing studios made clients endure. Even with a Petzval portrait lens, fast f/3.6 or thereabouts, the big barrel with the hood like a cathedral, a delicious edge fall-off and swirled field, the exposures were not instantaneous unless the day was perfect. Children blink, wobble, they sink into blur. That's why the second clue never feels like a clue when you want to be comforted by it. It wants to be tenderness. It's not. The pupils are too solid. I put the loupe in my palm and bring my face down, mouse breathing over the print to keep the glass from fogging. The reflection where the iris should feather is a dot, a pin of ink. The upper eyelid line is too clean. It's a graphic rather than an eyelid. Eyelids have density transitions, half shadow, lashes scattering light into thin crescents. Here, someone has painted catchlights exactly where the studio had taught them, mimicry of an open gaze. The pupils are positioned slightly off true convergence, like the eye of a doll. When I switch to UV, they flare differently than the rest of the flesh. It's a retouching medium with a different binder, maybe gum arabic with lamp black, maybe a spotting ink in bone black or a touch of Prussian blue mixed with gelatin. The fluorescence has the faint teal that shellac can show when it's old. A restorer must not romanticize human touch, but I can't help it. Someone sat with this print and decided the child should look awake. The painted pupils, characteristic in morning photographs, tell you which world the child had already joined before the shutter opened. As I adjust the fiber optic gooseneck closer, the light slides past lens flare and lands on the baby's right eye. It responds as eyes do when light enters. The specular kicks, climbs. Only it climbs after I stop moving the arm. The catchlight migrates up the eye's surface, a bead of wet that wasn't on the card 5 minutes ago. I tell myself I'm watching the specular highlight off the ring light reflect in my loupe's convexity, that I am caught in my own optics. Then the left eye does it too. The inky peaks glisten in the way that retouching paint will when it loosens under heat. But the lab is cold. My body's a thermostat. The lab is always cold enough that your fingertips ache through nitrile at 2 a.m. And then the eyelid line alters, ever so slightly, from a hard graft to a softer edge, as if paint is wicking along paper fibers. It curls downhill with gravity's tiny pull. Only the card is flat. The hairs on the back of my hands lift in those little chevrons that have nothing to do with objective analysis. The child's gaze finds my face reflected in my loupe. A conservator's comfort is evidence. For a heartbeat, I am absent of it. You reset yourself with procedure. I move the card aside to a clean blotter, hands steady. I prepare a tiny test on the border where no image lies, wetted swab with deionized water only, tapping to test solubility. The swab's white nose comes away yellowed. Albumin will do that, and the sizing in the mount can migrate. On the unprinted edge, I try a breath of ethanol on another swab. No lift of ink. Good. No fountain pen additions to the mount. Back to the center. If the eyes are retouched, the original underlying layer should be secure. Still, I don't touch them. This is not a cleaning, it's a reading. And the reading moves to the third observation, the one that seems like a kindness when you explain it to families. Blur and sharpness do not belong equally to all parts of a body that should have moved together. Focus is particular. In a Petzval, the field is not flat. The center is crisp, the edges whirl. But the head and ear share a plane. If the ear is sharp and the mouth is a haze, the head moved or the exposure was too long. The infant's right ear has a crisp cartilage ridge. I can count the arc of it like the edge of a shell. The hands are modestly in focus too, which is unusual. Children's fingers are the first to soften. But the jawline is a breath, and the lips have a woolly veil over them. The sheet under the child's left elbow, a lace perhaps, is razor. And there's no metal brace rising behind the skull. Studios used posing stands, iron uprights with a half-moon clamp padded with felt to hold an adult's head by the nape. Traces of them sometimes skitter into the frame as ghost posts. For infants, the clamp doesn't work. They used pillows, aprons, hands. In this print, where the clamp should rise, something else is touching the head. I might have gone home had it been any other object. But a hand that isn't there is a symptom you cannot ignore. At first it's a tonal swell the size of a lemon, just behind the child's left ear, where the bud jawline smudges into the background. It gathers as an oval, then articulates into whorls, tiny arcs that under magnification parse into a pattern like skin ridges, the kind left when someone presses too firmly during developing and lifts an emulsion. But this is not lifted. This is inside. The baby's hair, as fine as the fuzz on early peaches, folds around what is pressing. The hair lies around it the way hair lies around fingers. I back the loupe away and watch idiotically as the invisible hand flexes. The hair responds in the strict, absurd logic of recorded light. It should not move. It does. A faint fingerprint blooms on the background, oily. I can't tell if it's in the air between me and the print, a residue from some technician long dead splashed onto the protective acrylic and awakened in the fluorescence warmth, or if it is appearing inside the albumin itself, in the print's very silver halides, encouraged somehow by my breath. I hold still. The fingerprint taps the back of the infant's head as if to make it sit straighter. Numbers steady me. If the exposure was long, a head might droop and a hand would intervene. No clamp because a hand is kinder. The child's mouth would open slightly when a tiny chest seeks air between beats of holding still. The tongue would broaden behind the lips, softening them, wooling their outline. If the hand is visible, not a 19th century mother's finger but the record of pressure captured in the very emulsion, something is wrong with my reading or the card's chronology. The image is reminding me of its process, not its subject. I'm stubborn. I do what I always do when the rational is insufficient. I change instruments. Under the microscope again, an incident light, the emulsion is a land. Albumin, egg whites whipped and blended with salt, was brushed over the paper and then smoothed to glossy. When dry, it holds silver salts that darken with light. Craquelure forms as the protein binds and ages. Modern gelatin does it differently. Gelatin silver prints from the 1890s, printing out papers that tanned in sunlight and then were fixed, or the newer developing out papers coaxed to image in the darkroom under a red glow, have a different sort of silvery skin and a baryta underlayer that fluoresces under UV. I lean in. The microcrack patterns in the highlights are fine and reticular, the way albumin likes to fracture. The shadows, though, carry a blue-shifted metallic sheath that creeps in from the edges, silver mirroring. Many albumin photographs have some mirroring when they've been boxed poorly. Gelatin often shows it more aggressively, a peacock fringe where silver migrates to the surface and redeposits in thin metal. But here the mirror is a lake. It drifts along the infant's left cheek in a crescent, peeling itself from shadow. Silver mirroring is beautiful if you forget what it steals. It robs your blacks and leaves behind a sheen that behaves like mercury, breathing, slicking itself into the air around a face. Under raking light, that sheen carries back into your eye an image of your hand hovering, the underside of your jaw, the whites of your eyes. And so I'm staring at a 19th century baby and I see myself floating in the baby's shadow, a ripple of my own face convected across the skin of a ghost metal. In my reflected forehead, something bright moves. The silvering twitches like a pool when a hatchling fish flicks. Then the sheen rises along the child's nostril, coats it, and the outline of the nose acquires, just for a blink, the exact gleam of an exhale. I exhale without meaning to and smell something I haven't smelled in years. Not the vinegar ghost acetic acid leaves when you open a tray, not the faint sulfide must that old albumin keeps when the proteins break. Camphor. The inside of a trunk with a baby's blanket folded in it, moth-proofed and forgotten. The black drape in the print swells again and the lab's black focusing cloth, rolled on the top shelf for demonstrations of view camera technique, an old symbol we keep for teaching, rustles. Those sounds are ordinary, the building breathes, cloth shifts with air. Except the air is still. I am the only moving thing. I say the fact out loud. I say there is no draft. This is where people scoff or where they lean forward. They always divide. I never tell anyone anything I cannot rest on a lab note. So I do not say breathing cloth in the notebook. I write, visible mirroring heavy along left cheek and nostril. Unusual density change in background, possibly contamination with oils. Latent finger patterns present. Recommend solvent testing on carrier acrylic to rule out extraneous fingerprinting. But the acrylic is clean. When I run the blue light along it, there's nothing. The whorls are in the picture. They were always in the picture and they are not decaying, they are forming now. I set the card aside and examine the mount, which should not care when I look at it. Mounts are honest. They bear labels which are wrong or right. They have bevels which belong to periods of fashion. Their backmarks, the studio scrolls and angels, those flourished serifs like a theatrical curtain, change when a photographer changes a dress. Clue 5. Always administrative, always safety. I turn the card over to read the imprint, grateful for typography and ink stamped into a world where light and damage do not swirl like language. The back bears a studio mark in a handsome Roman face, initials, city, a wreath. The wreath design is from the late 1880s. The telephone number is not there, good. Older. The border on the front is a gold rule with rounded corners, bevel tinted to a somber brown. In the 90s, cabinet cards often went matte, sober. Black mounts were fashionable, especially for mourning. This mount is a deep umber rather than dyed black, with a bevel rub that likes to be gold if you tilt it, but here it reads dull. The edges have been trimmed fractionally, my calipers show a loss of less than a millimeter on the long edge, the bevel inconsistent, as if a previous restorer or a framer shaved it. The studio's wreath is wrong for the city listed. I know the wreath used by that shop at that time from another collection. The ribbons twine left, not right. The type for the city is set in a face that didn't appear until 1898 in their trade cards. In my mind I file the list of small untruths. Sometimes photographers remounted older prints for families, adding their later marks. Sometimes families remounted prints onto memoriams, gilding the borders or trimming away other people in a scene. Sometimes grief rearranges deadline and date and the artifact shifts to keep company with the living. The front tells me enough to add stomach to the quiet. The border is a printed bevel with the soft matte that hides fingerprints better than high-gloss gilding. The surface is slightly porous. If you had held it often, the sweat of your thumb would mud it darker at the lower right. There is such a dark. And then there is such a light, tiny moons where sebum never touched because fingers have held the edges like a sacrament, avoiding the image, touching only the frame. Photo paper is a nerve ending. Remembers? In the upper right of the image, near the vignette's fade, there's a smear oily like someone stroked the sky. Under UV, it blooms in a way that says either vegetable oil or human. It is right where a mother's hand would be if she pulled the drape back to check that what looks like her child is her child. I don't reach for the solvent sweet. I don't set up gel on to draw the oil. I stand. The lab chair rotates a fraction, slewing my reflection in the long glass for the light room. In 6 steps I am at the window. The city at night is beige pixels and rows. The lab smells like fiber paper when you first soak it, wood and gelatin and a metallic hint. Without turning, I know the black focusing cloth has shifted to the center work table. I know that if I were a different kind of person I would leave. We all have a threshold and mine has a thermometer in it. Tonight the room is too cold for sweat and yet my forearms are damp beneath my lab coat. I go back. You can see a morning picture almost at once or not at all. People prefer not at all. They prefer tiny sunlit lives. They prefer to ignore that studios posed the dead, washed and combed, because families deserved a last portrait and science had not yet invented the indecencies of flash or the insistences of fast film. They prefer that babies are always asleep in pictures, not just sometimes dead. The eyes have said what they came to say. The hand has pressed the skull. That should be enough. But there is one more surface reading, and it is a violence we do when we must. I slide a mylar shim under the top edge of the print where it lifts from the mount, just a fraction, a cusp unglued by time. I want to see the papers back. Conservation exists in the tension between reverence and incision. I'm not in the habit of taking a scalpel to anything I do not have to. But the adhesive has failed at the upper right, and there is a wrinkle that needs humidification. The paper wants to lay flat again. We do no harm by looking. I humidify the corner gently, the hairlines of albumin's craquelure glistening when a whisper of moisture skates on their surface like morning on a frozen pond. I slide the tiniest of Teflon lifters beneath, pause when the fibers sing that little creak. The paper rises. Beneath, the mount is not the mount. It is a second mount cemented clumsily over an earlier card. The older card is black. Not brown, not umber, funereal black dyed into the stock. In the nerve-cold moment after discovery there is the body's stupid flare of triumph. Someone had hidden a layer and I have found it. The triumph collapses on its face when I read the litho in the revealed corner. A cross and a wreath with a ribbon bearing a phrase I know from hundreds of memorials. In loving memory. The present mount is a disguise. Someone repackaged a mourning card in a deep brown to pass for ordinary. Their grief offended someone else's tougher decor. They made it polite. They hid the borders that told the truth. They polished the baby's eyes to wakefulness. In the blackness of the inner mount, the emulsion of the albumin at the corner, now slightly lifted, curls like eggshell under a thumbnail. The smell of camphor brightens. A filament of hair is trapped like a fossil insect between mount and back, coarse, brown. Not a baby's. A mother's hair clamped by paste and a century. I touch it with the static tip of a dry brush, and it clings to the bristles and then to the glove. When I shake it, it does not drop. The minute movements of my hand draw the air across the print and the baby's painted pupils decide to find breath. You cannot train a body not to see an infant inhale. It is the oldest reflex. The tiny lips part a fraction more. If the blurring on their edge is emulsion, if it is my interpretation, if it is the swarming of silver mirroring across topography, still it looks like air. There is no air in a print. There is breath in the lab. I don't notice that I am beneath the black cloth until I am. When I teach the view camera, I crown myself with it and lean into the ground glass and fall in love again with upside-down worlds. Tonight I do not remember getting up. The cloth smells of dust and all the demonstrations we have done for students who think pixels begin and end without bellows. The cloth covers my head and the table, and the world inside it is the world that preserves light. Under the cloth, the card is a small country lit by 2 fiber optics like moons. The outer lab dims into a rumor. The edges of the print darken further, vignetting done by cloth. I am under a camera that is not there, under a blank nothing with eyes. My breath gathers and warms my face, and something in that breath draws the silver to the surface in a slick I can see. It crawls out of shadow and coats the infant's nose and the infant's eyes and the drape and the smear of the mother's hair. Silver migrates where light and humidity kiss it and coax it into motion. I am a heat source, a humid mouth. I am a reagent. We forget that 19th century glass makes sound. The lab keeps a stack of unused plates to show students what collodion smells like when it's new. A sweet ether fog, a honeyed harshness that tastes of charred sugar on the tongue. I hear glass now, not in the room but in the card. Fine glass tinkling like voices in the thickness of a mirror when it cracks under strain. I hear a whisper of a shutter I do not own, a leaf of light cutting. When I put my ear to the desk for no good reason, I hear a voice through wood as if the bench were a bellows, as if the table were the back of the camera, as if the void for the dark slide were a mouth. It is not English or Portuguese or any other language. It is the grammar of lab habit, the hiss of syllables that name tools. Chemical names said like lullabies. Hypo. Sodium thiosulfate, fixer, the thing that removes what is not meant to be seen and leaves the remainder to harden. I think absurdly of scalding a print back to life in a toner bath, of adding gold to cool the silver's warmth to a truer black, of stabilizing a ghost with chloride and taste. I think of gel-on-gel pads drawing stains through capillarity. I think of the discipline that lies in never introducing your fear into your treatment. You do not get to put your hands into the figures. But the figures have decided to put themselves into me. The hand on the back of the infant's head, its oily whirls now a lattice as delicate as lace, lifts. The hair follows and falls again as if a living head is under it. My scalp tightens. A pressure as sure as a posing stand's half-moon clamps the notch where my skull meets my neck. The pressure is gentle. It is the tenderness a mother uses to steady. It holds me. It does not hurt. It insists. If I sound calm, it is because I narrate my own disintegration with the same tone I use for casework. The brain builds a bridge with what it has. Under the cloth, I feel the weight shift on the stool, and for a moment I think it is my own movement. Then I feel the bow of someone else's breath in the hollow of my collarbone. It is cool. The cool of hands that have just been rinsed in a tray long since emptied. I have never agreed with the superstition that photography steals souls. Photography rounds them into clarity and returns them to us altered. Alteration is a theft if you're stubborn. I am stubborn. The pressure at my neck finds a place it prefers. It is exactly where the posing stand would hold a sitter. Sometimes a spur digs. Sometimes the felt is smooth. Under my jaw, it is barely there. My chin rises in that minute submissive tilt that belongs to being made to sit still for someone else's purpose. My eyes find the baby's eyes then, and the painted pupils look back and stop being paint. There are documents that complete themselves. Not by your hand. You can steward them into their own conclusion if you are not careful. When I set the card onto a clean surface, I changed its angle to light. When I raised humidity, I encouraged migrations that were waiting to travel. When I cloistered us under black, I made a darkroom, and a darkroom has one function: to catalyze. If the photograph wanted to finish, it would choose a fixer, an agent to make the latent visible and the rest relinquish. I had chosen already by staying. In the scholars' libraries, it is a fact that the hidden mother's fabric sometimes takes on the contour of the face beneath it, that the shape of loss registers just enough to pity. I tilt the card and it stops being pity. The fabric folds are not folds. They are the geometry of a human head, brow and cheek, mouth and chin. Not a stranger's head. What? The drape has found a new outline to record, and because the silver is generous where light roves, it takes me fully. The shadows around my features rise like oil in water, a stain that is the portrait of me reflected and then embedded. The child's gaze, which had always looked slightly away, now aligns. In the lab glass beyond the black cloth, I know our two faces align in the float of silver. In the print, a faint strand of my hair, loosed from the out edge of my hood, where I tuck it when I lean in over bats, has migrated into the field. You do not notice such things while immersed. You notice them when they are fixed. Someone on the far end of the building opens a door and lets a corridor's worth of air move. The black cloth rises and falls, a lung. Beneath it is a camera. The child's mouth opens to the width of a small vowel. The word is my name the way my grandmother said it, with a clipped ending as if a spool ran dry. That is not possible. The lab does not film voices. It records nothing but care notes and invoices, and we are not even filming this. And yet the microphone, a little shotgun on a stand left from last week when we recorded a tutorial, picks up the whisper and does not play it back. The whisper plays forward into my bones. This is where the fiction of technical discourse cannot hold. My tools belong to 1 century, the baby's voice belongs to none. I do what the living do when asked to be still by the dead. I obey. My spine finds an alignment the clamp likes. My hands go flat on either side of the mat, finger pads on the blotter, a conservator's stance to avoid contaminating the print, and become the parentheses on either side of the child's tiny torso. My fingertips sense vibration in the wood table, a music lower than notes, the hum of electrolytes in a muscle that is not moving. The hand behind the child's head settles once more. Not over the infant this time. Over mine. If there is a chemical equivalent for surrender, it is sodium thiosulfate rinsed long and patiently through a paper until no more light-sensitive silver salts remain to tempt a future into mischief. We call that washing to completion. We rinse until the future cannot change the present. In the voice that is not a voice, in the breath that is the room's own, I hear the word completion as if it were a household adjective. The portrait was never finished. It desired one more presence to balance the composition. The mother stayed hidden. Her shape is absence recorded. The retoucher supplied eyes where there were none. The mount was dressed to hide grief. They asked the photograph to be a keepsake of life. It was a keepsake of death. It was never content because it missed the symmetry. 2 lives, one behind the drape and one before, both still, both becoming metal. Photographs have no agency. Photographs also short-circuit will. These 2 statements sit together until a night like this. I have held 1,000 prints. I have rescued school portraits from basements where foxing ate them alive. I have watched silver lift itself in flakes and fall to the table with the softest hiss. I have peeled tape off wedding pictures and dissolved nicotine from soldiers' faces and brought an entire family back from the corner of a flood on the back of a gel sheet like cooking gelatin gone holy. I have never allowed the past to make a decision for me. The voice is not a demand. It is a request. It whispers me into the mat like a gift. I lower my head. The breath that washes my neck is a darkroom's breath, warm and chemical and patient. I watch the silvering detach like a tide leaving a pool and slick the child's cheek, then the child's forehead, then climb, by capillarity or enchantment, into the circle of my face reflected in the black. The albumin's micro-cracks fill with a darker shade as if someone had worked a pigment into them, as we sometimes do with watercolors when we disguise a clean break. The retoucher who dotted the pupils returns, or I return his hand. He finds the corners of my eyes with the tip of a brush and declares them open. He draws the thinnest line of lash on my skin inside a 19th century child's environment. In the corner of the lab, the UV box hums itself into a fan whine that sounds like insects at dusk. I stop knowing which angle will break the illusion anymore. There is no angle that does not present the same interior truth. There is only one story left to tell. The photograph is a morning photograph and it wanted to complete its form. The visible and the hidden, the front and the support, the known and the ghost. All day it has languished in our boxes saying nothing. Tonight, with a willing technician, it arranges its own equation. When my coworker comes in at 8, she will find a card that looks unremarkably like an infant from 1896 in a chair too big for it, with a drape in the background that is slightly too coherent. She will remark on the quality of the albumin gloss and the heavy mirroring, and she will nod at the usual retouching of pupils, a conscientious studio hand long gone. She will miss the way the drape under magnification contains a face vaguely like mine. She will read the mounted layers and she will admire the tied ribbon on the black inner card and make a note about how often families conceal mourning in house-friendly browns. She will call me on the intercom. She will ask where the treatment proposal is. She will not know that the card already wrote it. I slide the black cloth back with a movement so slow it feels like saving someone light. The lab fluorescents resume their democracy across the benches. I write my notes into the database and they read well because I can still do that. The infant's eyes are ordinary again, a little darker than you might like, the eyelids foolishly neat. The oily print on the background has evaporated into what it was, a narrative I lay on a blotter and waited for. I place the card in a four-flap, the gentle miter folds kissing the mount's corners, and I slide the assembly into a new box with a spine wider than necessary to accept more air. I stand at the doorway. The building is a throat. The elevator opens and empties. I tell myself to go home. In the elevator glass, my reflection has a silver sickness at the edges I have seen on 1,000 prints. The bluish frill blooms on my jaw as if I had been rubbed with a tarnished coin. On the ride down it recedes. On the street, my reflection in a shop window does it again under a sodium lamp, and this time it does not quit. It coats my nostril in a mirror. It gives my eye a second eyelid made of thin metal. I put a hand to my nape in an old tired gesture. My fingers find the felt-smooth unmark of a floating clamp and rest in it like a habit. I walk the block to the train and my footprints turn to foxing spots in the dust where construction has left gypsum. The spots remain when I look back, orange and round like mold, and spell nothing. You can argue me back into daylight with catalogs and sample cases. You can show me 1,000 4x6s that did not try to eat their makers. You can insist that the story is a story told by a tired mind with an overbred relationship to surfaces. But I know exactly what I did. I completed a photograph. Not with adhesive or tissue or a carefully matched in painting over a chip. I let it finish reading what it had intended to say: we are each the other's support. We are the thing in the picture that others will not admit. We are the hand that holds the skull and keeps the mouth from falling open and the eyes from closing forever. We are the names on the back when the back says nothing. Tonight the albumin has taken me into its craquelure. It has wicked my lines into its network. When I rinse my face at home I will smell hypo not because I spilled any, but because completion leaves a scent that follows the fixer. Sleep will not wash it. Nights will now be darkroom nights. Mornings will develop me until the emulsion stops shifting. When strangers meet me they will say I am looking more like someone they cannot place. Subscribe if you want to see with me what else the archive has been waiting to finish. Subscribe now because some witnesses exist only once and some restorations demand company.